Welcome everyone to the inaugural Rails webinar, where we unify the worlds of TradFi and DeFi to build the future of finance. I'm Peter Bidewell. I'm the head of product at Parfin, which is the initial developer of Rails, and I'll be your host for today's session. So here with me, I'm joined by Leandro Pereira, the head of technology for digital assets at Núclea, and one of the largest payment processors in the Southern Hemisphere. And also with Alex Bulau, co-founder and chief product and technology officer at Parfin, the same company, which is the initial development company of Rails. To kick things off, it would be great for you both to briefly introduce yourselves. Leandro, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for the invitation, and sorry, but like my cat seems to wants to show off for the webinar. She's not like, sorry. She's stuck here. This doesn't usually happen. But that's homework, huh? Like it's like when you work from home, you have this kind of
exactly.
things, huh?
And very homely.
Yeah, so I'm Leandro. As Peter said, I'm the head of technology for digital assets at Núclea. And so we're building this Núclea chain. It's this network that has its core using Rails, from Parfin. And yeah, that's it. Like I'm here to see how can we share some of our knowledge and experience on building this network and all these applications that we have been working for the last months together with Parfin.
Great, Alex.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders at Parfin, also chief technology and product officer. And my background is basically like the title says. I've been involved in many different projects, doing either like developing technology as an engineer or as the head of product for many products, all the way from big companies to startups. And I've been in crypto for 11 years now. So I consider myself to be one of the crypto OGs. So very happy to be here. Again, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for Leandro for having the time. And hopefully we're going to have an interesting discussion.
It's great. And Leandro, just super quick, some of the members of the audience may not be familiar with Núclea. Could you just take a second to explain kind of what Núclea's primary business is, maybe provide some numbers that give it a sense of the scale of operations of Núclea?
So Núclea is probably the biggest clearing house in Brazil. We're not very known by the general public, but everybody uses something that it's at Núclea every day, especially in Brazil. For example, 100% of the boletos, it's a very known payment method in Brazil, are processed in Núclea. We also do other assets registration and settlement. Núclea also has some data products for banks and financial institutions. And now we're building this area, this digital assets area, to explore actually the potential of using blockchain in our services, in our products, and also create new products on top of that. In numbers, for example, just last year, we have been transacted around 18 trillion reais, which is pretty much twice the size of the GDP in Brazil in transactions. We also process around 90% of credit card transactions in the country, a little bit over maybe. And it's quite like a big infrastructure to serve most of the financial market, the capital markets in Brazil.
Perfect, great. And so now I'd love to hear a bit more about this collaboration between Núclea and Rayls and the project that we have together to tokenize receivables. Again, guys, can you just tell me a bit more about what this project is, where it came from, and I guess the potential that it could have on the industry? Maybe, Alex, let's start with you.
Sure. From our perspective, as I mentioned before, Parfin is the initial developer of this new product called Rails. What Rails is basically an EVM blockchain system. And I say system because it's not just a single blockchain. It's really like a system where it can combine a public chain, Ethereum layer 2, like a permissionless chain, with a range of what we call subnets. So these are permissioned chains that connect to the public chain optionally. And so for us, from our perspective, Núclea had some requirements, and we have been talking for some time. And we realized that we could basically cover all of the requirements that Núclea had when they were, thinking about building this new chain. What Núclea's chain is, from the perspective of Rails, is one of these subnets I mentioned, right? So the Núclea chain is powered by the Rails technology, and it is one of the subnets of Rails.
Great. And from Leandro, from your perspective, of course, because you were the ones that initiated the whole thing. So what was the beginning part for you?
So I like to say that we are not creating like another DLT for the market or just a network to serve tokenization purpose, etc. The idea of like the Núclea chain is to have like an ecosystem. So an ecosystem where we are, connected to the traditional finance systems, to the legacy that already exists, and it's, developing its part, today, but also to explore how can we improve this traditional finance side, using blockchain technology and connecting to new services, to develop like new applications, to explore new ideas of like connecting both worlds. I don't believe in the idea that one thing kills the other. Like I like to see blockchain and the use of like DLTs as an extension of something that already exists, and you can actually build, and think new ways of doing existing things, existing services, existing products, to make it better to the end user, but also exploring new applications that only blockchain, maybe, the use of blockchain as a technology, as an infrastructure, maybe allow. So we started this process last year, evaluating like multiple vendors, multiple companies. We decided to choose a technology or a solution, let's say like this, that could provide the two main pillars that we are looking for, which is privacy and interoperability in one same spot, So we didn't want to fragment this too much. So that's why we, on that time, it was like October, November last year, we decided to go with Rails. On that time was called Parchain, right? And to create the subnet that we would connect to this ecosystem that we are building, So on top of that, we also looking, for example, to the settlement part, for other platforms to integrate and how all this could operate together. So it's a matter of like building blocks. You have like Lego. You have a lot of like pieces that you need to put together, but they need to make sense. So on that time, the one, and it's still the one that makes more sense for what we are building. And the way we see this will evolve and grow. It's like a Parfin solution, like Rails. And we just launched it actually now, but I think we're gonna talk a little bit more later about that.
No, absolutely perfect. And maybe, I mean, it sounds like we've got this kind of this platform, this setup, if you like, for innovation and for all the different types of use cases that could come next. But just in terms of this very first one, so Rails and for the Núclea chain, we've just gone into production with this product, with this solution, this project. But it'd be great, Leandro, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit more about specifically this use case, this very first step on the journey. Why, for example, are we looking at tokenized receivables right now? What is the business case? What are the problems being addressed? And actually, how does this technology or Rails specifically address those challenges?
Yeah, when we look of like using a blockchain in a sector like Núclea is, like financial markets and capital markets, I think we need to slice, in layers. So I think there's a side that it's our core business, which is actually the financial assets. So it's the low-hanging fruit. It's where we could, experiment and create like a more get some more time to market, with what we already have, building like a digital twin of, an asset that it's already registered here in the legacy systems. So we're starting with what we call here duplicata. It's basically a receivable. So we tokenizing this together with a partner, the first participant actually of the Núclea chain, which is UniFi. It's a tokenizing platform here in Brazil. But when we slice this opportunity, we start to see, new assets also. Sometimes like assets that are out of this range that we already work. So there are like certain new things we already like exploring, new services also. It's not only about tokenizing something. Like the blockchain, the use of a blockchain is not like let's just tokenize everything. You can build like other applications, for example, proof of reserves, for stable coins and some other interesting, applications that would make sense in this ecosystem context that we are building. So to start, like I said, it's we're using the tokenized receivables. It's the duplicata. We're already preparing the field for new assets that we already like register here or settle. And I think for this initial phase, we'll be focusing on that. But again, we exploring, a wide range of opportunities to build, new products, new applications, and look at new assets or new. I don't like sometimes to say assets, but like to new things, to build on top of what we already like have here.
Yeah, great. And I think it's a great first use case, right? Because as a registrar in effect of these duplicatas, right, Núclea is in a perfect position to create and connect an ecosystem of participants, to act as that authority that can kind of validate and give a thumbs up for when a participant mints and creates one of these digital or tokenized duplicatas. And then once that exists, of course, then you have an ecosystem of participants. These could be financial institutions and each of their clients that can then hold and transact and settle and move potentially these tokenized assets around across this network. And as you mentioned, with privacy and with interoperability between the different, quite independent members that can all connect together via this kind of Núclea chain shared network. So it's quite an exciting use case. I think that the core mechanisms being in place to facilitate the creation of the tokenization of these assets, the movement and settlement and DVP between the different participants. And so now, Alex, maybe you can tell us a bit more around how the technology of Rails enables that to kind of come to life, right? So how from a more technology perspective, what is it about Rails? How does it work, perhaps? And you can explain maybe applied to the use case of the Núclea chain.
Yeah, sure. So I think, one of the core principles of Rails, and it's something that we wanted to make sure was present in the product since the beginning, is what we call UniFi. Okay, and this is going back to something that Leandro just mentioned, which we fully agree, which is that in our view, the goal here for blockchain is to bring the best of the permissionless world, like DeFi and all the innovation and all the developers and the community and the ecosystems. And those are the things that we learned with blockchain. Those are the best things that blockchain can bring. And how can we combine that with the requirements of institutions? Because institutions, I mean, what we used to call, or we still call TradFi, those are massive institutions, and that is highly regulated, rules that have been created over 100 years or even more, and they have been proven to work and to provide order and to make sure that things work in a proper way and that no one is going to run away with your money and so on. So we do believe that traditional financial TradFi and traditional financial institutions and DeFi and blockchain and permissionless world, they both have things to contribute to the future of society. And so this is what we call UniFi. And so with that, one of the things we have done is we have been, because Parfin is the initial developer of Rails, like we mentioned, but also Parfin has other products, right? And some of the products being used by major financial institutions around the world, but mostly around LATAM at the moment. But this gave us a lot of insights into what is that financial institutions really need. That, and also the fact that I have to say, Parfin is really a company built by both bankers and technologists. And so one of the things we learned by talking to all of these different financial institutions is a sequence of requirements that we sought to fulfill with Rails. For example, a couple of things that Leandro also mentioned, the case of privacy. So privacy of information, privacy of accounts and transactions. This is very important because without that, you cannot have multiple, many times competing financial institutions on the same chain if they can see what everyone else is doing. So this is a big problem that we sought to solve. And also the question of scalability, because financial institutions, they process thousands of transactions per second, and you put a bunch of those in the same chain, the chain is going to explode, right? So you have to be scalable. And then things like governance, very important for financial institutions because they are regulated. And so in the case of the subnet of Núclea, then of course Núclea is the governor as well of the chain. And so in technical terms, the way that we solved all these problems is that we basically took advantage of Ethereum. Ethereum today, what it uses is something called EVM, so Ethereum Virtual Machine. And so this kind of became the standard today for building smart contracts and all this DeFi revolution. And there's so many, the ecosystem is so big, there's so many developers, so many things going on, so much innovation. So we chose to work with this ecosystem. And so what we've done is we took Ethereum itself and we modified it. And this is what Rails is. Rails is 100% compatible with EVM, so with Ethereum. And Rails has two major components. So one is a permissionless chain, which is, like I mentioned before, an Ethereum layer 2. But then the subnets, they are also Ethereum compatible. And each one of the subnets, it has a central blockchain, which is EVM compatible again, which is owned by the governor of that chain, which could be one institution or it could be decentralized. And then each participant has their own Ethereum client that we call a privacy ledger, and it's always connected. They are connected with each other, and you can transact. So institution A can send a private transaction to institution B through the system inside of a subnet with complete privacy, and all of this is very scalable because it's made of different blockchains, if you will, different ledgers that connect to each other. So I don't want to get too much into the technicalities here, but it's just a bit of the story. And the context of what is Rails and from a high level how it works.
Oh, that's excellent. And so what I'm hearing from that is that each institution individually can have their own, in effect, their own Ethereum client, as you were saying, to manage, a very, very large number of their own client accounts, maybe tens of millions in the case of some banks, to manage their own internal operations of minting tokens and transferring between their own internal clients. But then through this interoperability and this subnet system, they can then transact privately with each other as well, and even connect out to the Rails public chain. So it's a fully kind of interoperable system. And actually, just on that, Leandro, it's extending that concept of this kind of UniFi concept that Alex just mentioned between TradFi and DeFi, and interoperability between different players within this ecosystem. I guess one of the other kind of downfalls that we've seen from the permission blockchain space is often they can be quite siloed, right? Even though they're decentralized, they can create networks that are actually quite independent from the rest of the financial ecosystem. And that lack of interoperability can be a bit of a hindrance, right? And prevent them from moving forward. So from your perspective, what in terms of what you're building here with Núclea Chain, and again, using the interoperability provided by Rails, how does this tokenized platform integrate and play nice with your existing kind of TradFi systems, maybe other providers that form the whole solution for the platform, and even other forms of innovation, perhaps from public Ethereum space, for example? How do you see this kind of all fitting together, and how does that made possible?
Look, we believe the future, like when I say we, like I believe, and I think our vision here in Núclea for this kind of technology is that there will be like a hybrid environment. You have like multiple networks, sometimes different technologies, and they will have to communicate. There will be a time that maybe you don't connect everything, but you are able to talk with a certain standard in different environments. Like we're talking about like the EVM. Through bridges and other kinds of like interoperability. And like I said, when there in the beginning, it's our main points, like our main pillars, is to build something that has a strong privacy component. So Alex explained it, it's pretty much the way we are building here in this network. We have like participants, financial institutions, tokenization, platforms, etc., running their own, node, a privacy ledger, where all these transactions are not public to the rest of the network. Only if they transact between one and the other, they both see that specific transaction, and that's it. But like that's the first thing. The second thing is actually we don't believe we are creating an island, and we don't want that. We are creating a network that is for the market. So we welcome other participants and other IMFs or other financial institutions that wants to build their environment and connect to our environment, and you need some sort of transport for this. So otherwise you just increase the island, you just make the island bigger. So that was an important thing when like Alex and Parfin, they brought like the vision of Rails, how they were like building this solution, this platform, that would have in a near future a public chain that could be the transport for all the subnets around, and everybody could talk, and also to connect to other environments that could translate this message, have these bridges to other kinds of networks that maybe don't talk the same language, the same protocol. But I think this is the most important thing, like to build something that you can be really able to interconnect, to interchange information. Because otherwise, one movement that I see, it's very common in these markets, like institutions, they creating their own islands, And yeah, now it's okay. Yeah, maybe a lot of people doing like POCs, you know, proof of concepts, MVPs, experimenting. But if you're thinking on build something in the long run, you know, and grow this, it's the interoperability component. I think it's the second most important, you know, but privacy is still like the first one. If you have like a solution, and I don't believe anyone has like a final solution now for what will be built for the next, I don't know, 30 years, you know. I think what we have now, and it's something that makes sense to evolve, you know, to grow and to become better. So that's also the way we think here. So how can we interoperate in the first stage? Oh, okay, this for now it's fine. But how this will evolve, you know, I think this vision is also important to understand. And this job, I think Alex and Viriato and you guys, you bring like for us very clear, you know, like how do we see this evolving in like in the short, in the mid, and in the long run? Yeah, it might change along the way. It's technology, you know, but at least we have like a guideline, you know. We know, hey, yeah, that makes sense, you know. Let's look into that direction, and let's prepare our strategy, you know, our growth strategy for this product on top of that, you know, because first you build, then you launch, and then you grow. So we just live in the build and enter in the launch phase. And in the launch phase is where actually you identify, you know, if things really make sense, because they will have to work, you know. So and so far, so far so good, you know. So far it's moving towards the direction we expected.
Excellent, excellent. And I think, you know, that really resonates with what you were saying around the connectivity of, I think, what's the term we keep hearing, which is private placement and public distribution, or private issuance and public distribution. So the idea that you can create a fully compliant and, you know, regulated private space, but then you still have that avenue to kind of share and to transport, as you were saying, an asset beyond that kind of siloed island. So, I mean, I think there's definitely a trend we're seeing around connecting the TradFi, you know, permissioned space with the fully public and open blockchain space. So
Yeah,
again,
things can complement. Maybe this full decentralization idea, it's just an abstraction, you know. Maybe the distribution idea, it's much more interesting, where you have like decentralized components, you have centralized components, and you have hybrid environments, and they all can live together, you know. Like there are some applications, they much better if you think in this really decentralized way, but there are many others that there is a big risk, you know. And like our core business here is to avoid the risk, you know. It's to avoid failure. That's why we look also for this strong governance, you know, in the network, strong, not control in a sense of controlling what people will like build, but what is happening there, to avoid, you know, risk, to avoid frauds, to avoid, you know, a lot of things that it's Núclea's core business, you know. Make sure that A receives from B, and in between there's someone orchestrating that, you know, with like transparency according to the regulatory spectrum, you know, and the technology behind that must, like the technology evolution behind all this, you know, basic rules, they must like follow, you know, what is expected from the mainstream media, let's say like this, you know. So
Yeah,
instead
and
of
I
like
think, you
trying to
know,
find.
I also think just zooming into one of the topics you mentioned, that is actually one of the reasons why we wanted to go with the subnets approach, because you mentioned regulation, right? And if you look from a global perspective, every country, they have their own regulation. And so to create a single chain where you would expect everyone to comply to a regulation, I mean, we cannot even agree what is this regulation, right? And so one of the advantages of, in my view, what we have built with Rails is that because you have these different subnets, then you can have different subnets in different jurisdictions and in different situations that will comply with whatever rules and whatever regulation exists in that place. And then this brings me to just one more point, Peter, if you allow me, that I wanted to also zoom in. You guys mentioned about this creation of islands, right? And we, the three of us here, we've been in the space for some time. We all have seen projects like this, that what tends to happen is this: an institution decides to use blockchain. So then they create this permissioned blockchain, which is in the end of the day an island. And in the beginning, everyone is happy because it seems to work, but then time passes by and people start questioning, I mean, what's the use of this? Why did we do this, right? What is the advantage that this brings that we couldn't have done with a database, for example? And to me, the answer to that question is exactly what Rails is supposed to solve, which is this interoperability aspect of being able to connect your system with a wider system, with the public chain or even with other subnets, to really create an ecosystem, which is, I believe, what Leandro is also saying is the point of having this is so that you can create a thriving ecosystem and bring new participants in a way that brings the whole project forward, right? And not for you to isolate yourself or your institution in an island that does nothing with the external world.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm about to double down on one of the points you just mentioned, but before I do, we're only a couple of questions from the end. So anyone in the audience that's listening, if you have any questions, we're going to reserve some time at the end for a bit of Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please do post them in the chat, and we'll see them pop up on the screen, and we'll hopefully get to them. So yeah, do have a think and feel free to post. But let me just go back to one of the things you were saying around the kind of the governance piece and the kind of the auditability and even around kind of preventing fraud. So I think between the two of you, the last kind of couple of minutes, I'd be curious, Alex, just in terms of the way in which Rails is set up. You alluded to the idea that you could, these different jurisdictional networks, these different subnets that can be perfectly built for purpose, exactly how they need to be for the local regulation. Could you just explain a little bit more about how that works in Rails? How is it that some authority what can they do in the network to kind of govern, and what can they see in the network, and how does that work with the privacy side? And I guess also, if you're mentioning around these independently managed kind of privacy ledgers for each institution, that's quite a distributed network. How do you ensure that there's no fraud taking place or double spend across the network?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very important point, because if you look at what blockchain really solved, it's basically the double spend problem, right? So how can you have a digital copy of something and then send that to someone else and making sure that you don't have it anymore, right? And so if your blockchain system doesn't solve that problem, then you're going back in time, and it's just back to square zero. And so one of the things that we took a lot of effort in Rails was to build a cryptography environment, a cryptographic environment, using a lot of cryptography. So we use things like zero knowledge proofs and homomorphic encryption and commits and a whole range of technologies that actually some of them have been quite recently invented even, to ensure that the system is consistent. So each one of the subnets, it is a environment in itself, right? So you have like I mentioned before, a central blockchain, which we call the commit chain. And that is usually, or it has to be governed by a governor. So there's a role of the governor. And so this governor is the one that decides who can join the subnet. For example, in the case of Núclea decides if a financial institution can join or not join. So to keep things simple and secure. And also the governor decides the rules of operating the whole system. So for example, which tokens are allowed to transact in this subnet, what you need to do to be able to register a token to transact. And for example, if law enforcement or a regulator comes in and says, look, you have to freeze this institution. This is possible too, because this is quite, all I'm saying is those things are quite common space in the traditional finance world, okay? Maybe they're not so much in the public chain, because public chains, they are built for a different situation, but in for financial institutions to use blockchain, those things are hard requirements. If a regulator comes in and they say you have to freeze this token, or you have to freeze this institution, or there's fraud happening, you have to be able, as a regulated financial institution, to comply, right? And so Rails allows all of that to happen through the governance system, like I said, that is done by the governor of the whole subnet. But also, in addition, even though that all transactions are private, this is totally true, like what Leandro just said, and we use zero knowledge technology for that and some other things. There is a possibility for a subnet to say the transactions can be open and picked into by a role of an auditor. So this is an optional thing for a subnet. So for example, in cases where there is an actual auditor who is, let's say, the regulator, and they have to be able to peek into transactions to know what's going on. So this can be enabled in the subnet. All participants are aware that this is enabled, so it's not a surprise. It's not something that happens behind the scenes. They are aware because they have to share a key for that to happen even. But then what this means is you can have the role of a regulator, in your subnet, that they and only they can see transactions and can, determine if transactions are valid or not. And there's a few other things, some components we've built, like there's something called the flagger, who monitors the health of the system, and if there is attempts to defraud any part of the system, it will send a signal to the governor and to the auditor. So there's quite a few things there, but the point is that the purpose of the subnet is to be an environment that financial institutions feel comfortable using. That is the whole purpose, and that is why we built the system, and this is why it has all these bells and whistles, and to make sure that we can build a system that is compliant with regulations, and that financial institutions can feel comfortable using, that they're not going to have surprises in the morning when they open the system.
That's great. And so just to kind of reflect all that back to you, it feels like the kind of the outcome of Rails is to achieve the very best of all the different worlds you've just described, from what you would expect from a centralized database, in effect, in terms of scalability and performance, with some of the governance powers that you would expect if you are the governor of your own centralized database, but then blended with some of the kind of the decentralization that you would expect from a permission network of tokenization and transferring tokens, but also then with the full kind of transparency and auditability as an option, right, for a regulator to peek in. So you kind of get this best of both worlds, that it's everything that all the traditional financial world needs today as must-haves in order for them to properly use a certain piece of software in production for mission critical operations. But you still get all the upside that comes with the more decentralized, right, the more kind of blockchain based technologies. So it's kind of a fusing, if you like, or what I'm hearing is a blend of the best of both together.
Yeah, the subnet, you could say it's a fusion. Yeah, it's a fine line, right? I would say probably more of a distributed system rather than fully decentralized. I mean, decentralized, you can think of Ethereum is totally decentralized. What we have in a subnet is something called a proof of authority type of consensus algorithm, which allows the commit chain to have multiple different institutions validating the commit chain. So even though you have a governor, the chain, so the commit chain and the subnet by consequence can be, let's say, decentralized to the extent of you can have maybe a few dozen different institutions validating the transactions, whereas in a public chain like Ethereum, you have thousands, maybe even more, right? Different people in institutions validating transactions. So it's a little bit different there, but let's not forget that every subnet is also connected to a public chain, which is an Ethereum layer 2. So even from that perspective, we are really, like you said, we're trying to combine the best of TradFi and DeFi, and I'm going back to that concept of the UniFi that I mentioned in the beginning, because really that is the goal, right? So the goal is to create an environment that financial institutions feel comfortable using, and yet it can bring the best of both worlds, you know, to be easy to use for financial institutions, and not just financial institutions, the clients of the financial institutions too. And of course, anyone that uses blockchain today is welcome to also use the public chain, the Rails public chain as well.
Great, great. And Leandro, just bringing all of that goodness back to the kind of specifics of the projects that we have within Núclea. So we've gone into production a few weeks back, right? 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think it was now. In terms of the kind of the outcomes and feedback and the success of that project overall now and the place that we're at, you know, has there been anything that you can share in terms of the success metrics of how the project's been going? Over to you.
So, like you said, we just launched by end of June, early July. We started like some, let's say, soft launch with UniFi, tokenizing these duplicatas, these receivables, and trying to understand like what things we had to adjust, adapt during July, during this month, you know, to make this experience, especially for the participant, the partner, better. So we spent like most of July making this, you know, small adjustments, configurations. Now August, we started actually the plan to embark new participants. So we will have like a couple of others during this month and the next. And the idea, it's like by the end of the year, you know, by December, the network's much more populated. So we can start like exploring, you know, the services between them, you know. So because the idea of like Núclea chain is, again, it's to create this ecosystem, you know, where the participants, they can also benefit from each other, you know, they can exchange, you know, assets, you know, applications, etc. And we in between like orchestrating all of that, you know, and giving actually the operations of doing the operations of the network. Now in September we start doing like the settlements on chain, like by September, October. It's our this DVP that will be finalized in the network. We actually working now with like Parfin and our other partner, which is a local Brazilian company called Mobiap, which is building these integrations between actually the, you know, the worlds, and building this element that it's like the orchestrator. It's a lot of orchestration, orchestrator, but that's how it is, you know. You need some things in between actually to connect all this, you know, some middleware. So we actually adjusting this now for the October launch, you know, like the phase 3 we call of the project, and then we continue, you know, like we have like already like a plan until the end of 2025 of things that will be built and, you know, configured and developed on the network to expand, you know, this use case and also the application of all of this we building, you know. But coming back again to the Núclea's core business, you know, it's like the registration, the registry, the settlement and payments. So we're looking at these 3, you know, segments, these 3 like fronts to build like all the use cases we, you know, planning already.
It's great, really exciting. So just in terms of your roadmap, then it sounds like expand the number of use cases and therefore the different types of assets and settlements that are going through the platform. I assume, you know, expand the number of participants on the network and bring more in. And of course, I'd imagine also increase the volume of transactions between those participants over the coming months.
And by next year, also we already like we have been discussing with Alex how can we actually start integrating with the public Rails, you know? And there is something that it's also like a hot topic in Brazil now, which is Drex, you know? So it's the Brazilian, the digital real pilot, you know. So the Drax is like all that a platform behind that. It's being tested and evaluated by the central bank, which we also participate in one of the consortiums with Bradesco. And Parfin, like you guys are also, you know, are now started to test Rails as a solution. So I think for the next year, the idea is to explore more also this use case, you know, like how Drax will actually connect to what we are building, you know, because we see Drax as like the natural evolution for some parts of this network that we are, you know, developing now. For example, the settlement part, you know, so the settlement part will have to be adjusted, to change, you know, to accommodate the Drax, you know, building block. So it's there's a lot of like, you know, different lines, you know, you need to follow, but with the time passing, we see them coming closer, you know, so the things will meeting on the way, you know. So now things look a little bit disconnected if you know look in a broader perspective. But if you look closer, you know, with the years advancing and you see the technologies and the pilots and all the stats evolving, you know, and much others, you know, like out of like Brazil, abroad, etc. Things will meet somewhere, you know. So we are gonna meet in a space, you know, in time. So I think that's what is exciting, you know, that we are like part of this construction, you know, of all this movement, and we one of these dots, you know, like we all dots now in spread it, you know, but we're trying to we need to connect all these dots. We need to look for the other dots and welcome them, you know, to this ecosystems that are being built. I think it's a big time for cooperation. You know, I don't like someone says, oh no, these guys they building, they could be a competitor or they are a competitor. I don't believe on that. No, I believe that everybody is actually a dot that in a certain period of the time we will be connected, and then maybe our services and value proposition will make us to compete on something, you know. But now everybody's building, so it's the time actually to cooperate and to build together, you know.
I like the way that Leandro is explaining this, because that is really the spirit of blockchain, isn't it? It's like it's cooperate and create a bigger ecosystem, so to increase the size of the pie for everyone, right? And I quite like the way they explain it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And let me just highlight one specific part and make sure that, again, for everybody listening here and within the call, so to be very explicit, you've got one of the largest payment processors in, I think, the Southern Hemisphere, Núclea, who has already moved into production on blockchain Rails and looking to expand that operation significantly over the next coming months. And simultaneously, then you have the Central Bank of Brazil, for the full population of 220 million people of the country, who are making amazing progress on their CBDC program, which, again, if anyone's been following on the CBDC side, this is getting a lot of traction globally, a lot of recognition globally about the approach that the Central Bank of Brazil are taking, and how well considered their kind of their design is between a wholesale CBDC that then enables each bank to create their own tokenized deposits and kind of connects all of those different parts together into one single ecosystem. And so actually, if you combine those two different things together, you've now got real money on chain, you've got real financial assets on chain in a way that they can interoperate with each other, all within the same single jurisdiction, right? For the 220 million people and the, is it 400 or 500 institutions, financial institutions that exist in the country. So this is not, you know, another one of those POCs that we've been hearing about before. This is
no, this is real life, man. This is real madness. It's like I'm very grateful that we have like I'm in a company that is really thinking forward, you know, to build that. I'm really grateful to have the support of like my bosses, you know, Núclea's executive team, our CEO, you know, Andrea Dare, our VPs, you know, our CTO. We really like all in sync, you know, about this. We really understand that this infrastructure, you know, I don't like to gourmetize, you know, like blockchain. You know, blockchain is a technology. Okay, it's maybe we don't even call it like a platform. It's a technology that it can be implemented in different ways. You know, again, we go back to the decentralized, distributed, hybrid. You know, private. It's just labels. At the end of the day, you need to find case that makes sense, that stands still, you know. So if you look to the internet that in the 90s, you know, so that's the time, Alex, we say our age, you know. So if you look to the internet back there in 95, 96, you know, it was pretty similar, you know. You had like a lot of these things that people were building, they didn't make sense. You have like a specific speech of like decentralization and power and, you know, and all this. This is natural, you know. So now with blockchain, I think we already moving forward on this step. You know, if we compare to the internet, I think we already there in 98, 99, you know. We are about to discover the social networks, you know, which is actually it's making an analogy, you know, when you think on all these networks together, you know, all this hybrid environment, you really create like you know, a market network, you know, where you have all the protection expected for the end user, you know, all the regulatory and legal aspects being respected, you know, being fulfilled. It's not like you know, a Western, you know. So I think it's the best moment, and like we are in the right place, the right time, you know, and trying to do the right thing. So that's why we decided that yeah, let's not build another POC, you know. Let's just jump, you know. Let's just do it. So, but it's intense, you know, like Alex and other, you know, guys from Parfait, from like from the companies that are actually helping us to build. We're not building this alone. You know, we're building this with you guys. We're building this with MobiUp. We're building this with like other companies that's around, you know, Núclea technology department, you know, like supporting. It's not only my team that it's building this, it's like multiple teams inside the company, you know. There's a lot of people engaged to do that, you know.
Yeah.
It's like hundreds of people actually working intensively over like 7 6 months, you know, day and night and weekends and like planning, replanning, and with like a mentality, you know, a mindset of like, if we're gonna make a mistake, let's make it quick, you know, and let's fix it. Or this is too complex now, let's throw this, you know, to another phase. You know, let's make it like work. You know, let's follow the deadlines. Let's deliver. And once we build, then during the launch, we're gonna, you know, again, we're gonna start fixing, understanding, because also you cannot have some feedbacks or some insights before you actually, you know, put the car on the road. We put like, now we on the road, you know, and we actually we have a better vision how the road is, how this path, you know, will be this journey. And the way we build, we can adapt quick, you know. If something is not actually working the way we expected, you know, because like everybody in this business, you know, I don't say everybody, but I think 99% of the companies playing in the network, in the blockchain realm, they plan based on reports. You know, they plan based on use case that some consultant or someone studied, and he realized that this would make sense. But real life case, there are only few, you know. So and when you take like this case that, yeah, they work maybe on the crypto environment today well, or they work in the mainstream, the TradFi, you know, well, but now you need to blend. You know, you need to add like something new with something that extremely robust, you know, and regulated and controlled, and create some other animal. And that's where things start getting complicated, you know. So volume will come, you know. A lot of people are worried about like the volume using blockchain. Now, if you look at Brazil, I think Brazil is pretty advanced compared to most of the other countries, you know, in many sense. You know, we have like other companies building like with banks, you know. I can mention a lot of them, you know, like most of the tokenization platforms here, not only UniFi, but you have like Leaky, you know, building very interesting and successful use case, you know, with like Itaú and other companies, you know. You have an environment that contributes for you to have also real data, you know, real information, you know, not someone that thinks that it should work like this or it would work like that. It's like that joke that I do sometimes. It's they used to do this with big data and other technologies. It's tokenizations like teenage sex. Everybody talks about, but only few people really doing. You know, so we on that phase that we need to bring more people to do it because they are growing up, you know.
Yeah.
So the market's growing up, the interest by the companies, you know. If you look like 1 year 2 years ago, I'm on this for almost 5 years already, you know, working 100% with blockchain and what goes around. The understanding of what is this about is much bigger than last year or the year before. You know, I think also the Drax movement, you know, that I like to call, they brought a lot of attention to the topic, you know. Like if you like the way the central bank is communicating, you know, you see like Fabio Araújo, the guy that leads actually Drax, in a lot of like events, you know, conferences and explaining to people and everybody actually in the front run like us and you know other companies, we really focusing on this content creation and education, you know, like this is an educational experience, you know. This is
Oh, for
not
sure.
to say, oh, thing, you know, like to anyone, you know. If someone wants to buy Rails or the service for you guys, it's easy. Just go to the website or look for some information online. This is to educate, you know. Our objective here, my objective at least, I think Alex is the same. It's to educate the audience on what is this technology, why does this make sense, you know, why we should use it, or at least start studying this, you know. So I think that's the biggest point now. Sorry for the long speech, but it's I could talk about that for 8-10 hours straight, you know.
And
Like
trust
it's
me, I'd love to come back and maybe we can have a part two where we do continue this conversation. I think, yeah, absolutely brilliant points. And my kind of takeaway from what you just said there is, you said that there is this fusion that needs to happen, this TradFi and this DeFi that have to come together, which Alex is exactly as you said. This is this UniFi concept that we're seeing as a trend that people are picking up and talking about more and more. So I think we're just about out of time. What I wanted to do is there's a couple of questions I think we actually weaved in from the audience that we've already covered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for kind of final words from both of the speakers, any final comments, and then there's a little giveaway that I want to excite everybody with. But just final kind of comments. Actually, let's do it the other way around. Why don't we do there's a giveaway announcement we have where we're giving away a Token 2049 ticket. So there's a little QR code that will flash up on the screen in just a second. And that'll be the Token 2049 conference that will be in Singapore in September. So if you want to follow, there's a link that should pop up any second when the guys
the prize comes with the ticket and the hotel, or it's just the...
Correct. So there's a social media, yeah, not with the hotel or the flights, just the ticket itself, but still. So yeah, the team will be flashing it up in just a second. Follow that link, and there's instructions in terms of just sharing a post, and then you'll be in the running to kind of complete that. So so good luck with that one. And back to the two guests we have. Alex, I don't know if you have any final thoughts to close up with.
Yeah, I would like to say it's a pleasure to work with a company like Núclea and with Leandro. I think clearly they understand that this is like a journey, and there's a vision, a vision for the future. And so I think we are, very happy to be working with you guys, and appreciate the time. And it's really a pleasure when you can see that the vision is aligned, right? I think a lot of the things we said here we didn't talk before, but it turns out a lot of it is shared vision for the future. And for everyone that wants to learn more about Rayls, the best way right now is to go to the website is www.rayls.com. So that's Rayls with a Y, like you see in the screen. And yeah, we're happy to answer any questions in the future as well. Thank you.
Great. And Leandro, from your side,
yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. I hope that everybody enjoyed and took some topics to know more about. I can be found on LinkedIn if anyone wants to contact to know more about Núclea chain and what we are building here. Feel free to contact me, to message me. One last thing that I would like to say is for anyone building, especially if you are like in a big company, or in an institution that has plans to start building with blockchain and develop things, find yourself partners that can add value out of what you believe so I changed a lot of concepts and a lot of ways of like thinking and building this, working with Parfin and with Mobiup, our main, I think, partners here for this core, and find actually solutions that challenge what you think that would work. So find solutions that have like a long-term vision, and this vision must be aligned with what you want or in what you were being educated to build, because we still don't know everything. Like, we know so little, like and I can say that Alex, and you guys, we think sometimes that we already know a lot compared, to the market that is new, and a lot of people coming without not much knowledge about what's going on, but we still know so little about all this. There is so much to be found, to be tested, to be validated, like if you apply some scientific method here, like we are still thinking on our hypothesis, like we started actually testing things now. So like embrace this possibility of not knowing exactly what you actually doing, and be open for bring partners, bring people, bring companies that can help you on this vision, like get away of people that come with like a solution that that's the hotspot, that's the gold pot, by the end of the rainbow. It doesn't exist. This, what exists is actually a vision that we all believe that it's the right way. So let's start building little by little. Let's look for the long-hanging fruits. So what are the low-hanging fruits that we can grab, and feed ourselves, and then we get like energy to climb and to get like a higher fruits there. So I think that's the piece of my 10 cents, to the market.
No, that's perfect. Well, just wanted to say thank you to you both for the time today, and thanks everyone for joining. Watch this space. This will be the first of many of these types of webinars and AMAs and this sort of thing. So if you have any further questions, any thoughts, comments, please feel free to reach out to any one of us at the team. Likewise, also give us a follow us on our socials, join the Discord, join us on X. Lots more to come from here, and I think the future's looking pretty bright. So let's unify the ecosystem together. Thanks everyone for your time. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.